Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Emmeline, and this is Joanne, who's sitting there and abandoning me. And we'll be representing the exam skills team in talking about our paper, exploring the effectiveness of the English exam skills program on struggling non-dyslexic learners. So what is this English exam skills program? EESP for short. It's a third-hour program that was developed above and beyond the scope of our current curriculum in the main intervention program in DAS. So while the main program in DAS focuses mainly on literacy, the EESP curriculum was designed to meet the needs of primary school age students who would be sitting for their primary school leaving examination known as the dreaded PSLE. So through an analysis of primary 5 and 6 student errors in their end-of-year examinations in school, the EESP team actually came up with a curriculum that helps these students prepare and cope with the demands of the English language paper by targeting components that we see that they struggle with the most, namely in spelling editing, where we teach them how to make use of all their phonics knowledge that they pick up from the DAS main literacy program to do spelling editing in school, and synthesis and transformation, where we teach them how to make changes in a very structured, step-by-step, almost formulaic way, and comprehension, where we teach them strategies like annotation as well as question analysis. So our study serves as a follow-up on a previous research conducted by other members of the team, which explored the classroom practices of the EESP in DAS through a comparison of the performance between an experimental group of primary 5 and 6 dyslexic students who attended the program as well as a control group. So significant progress was actually recorded amongst the experimental group in all three components that were taught in the program, namely grammar, synthesis, sentence transformation, as well as comprehension, and compared to the peers who did not attend the program. So their results actually provide a basis for this current research that Joanne and I will be presenting on today. We recognize the benefits of a structured program, and which aligns closely to the Orton-Gillingham approach, OG for short, and the EESP team wanted to explore the possibility and potential of extending this curriculum to other struggling learners with or without a diagnosis of dyslexia, which actually means that they may or may not have access to intervention programs that are provided for those with a specific learning difference. So while there were distinct differences found between, am I on the right one? Nope. So while there were distinct differences found between those with specific language impairment, SLI for short, and dyslexia, especially in areas of phonological processing, word reading, and spelling accuracy, there have been studies providing neurobiological evidences in their similarity as well, which indicates an importance in oral language ability in acquisition of language skills. Thus, we see that intervention programs that can benefit students with dyslexia will also benefit other students with other language difficulties. So there are some principles that guide effective classroom teaching. For one, researchers have proven the effectiveness of a direct or explicit instruction methodology. So in a direct instruction methodology, students work in groups to receive new content and then participate in supported practice sessions. And teacher prompts and cues are then provided and faded as students are hopefully guided towards mastery. Throughout the process, teacher catches student errors and provides appropriate corrective feedback. So parallels are actually drawn between the characteristic features of the OG approach, which is what EESP is based on, and the direct instruction methodology. As seen in the following table, OG principles include the need for systematic and structured content, as well as sequential, incremental, and cumulative instruction, and intensive repetition, which are in line with the methodologies of direct instruction. We also drew parallels between the OG approach and the Universal Design for Learning, UDL for short, which Ms. Gita actually covered early this morning. So the UDL is a theoretical framework developed to guide the development of curricula that should be flexible and supportive of all students. It prescribes that the design of curriculum should take into consideration the needs of all students in mind. This means that teaching methods, materials, and modes of assessment should be usable and available to all. Based on the traditional curriculum, a student who has difficulty in decoding printed text would have to be compelled to adapt and as fast as possible and as best as he or she can. However, a UDL curriculum is designed to incorporate different mediums of instruction so that information is presented in a way that alternatives are available and suited to the student. So principles of UDL include recognition learning. This is where it encourages the use of several elements and materials to support instructional content. It also includes strategic learning, where teachers are flexible with their teaching methodologies, which allows students to find a suitable and desirable learning strategy for themselves. It also includes effective learning, which is the recognition of the importance of engaging students and the need for effective classroom management. So as seen on the table, the principles of OG also aligns with the UDL approaches, where the flexible yet sequential and cumulative curriculum in an OG-based approach supports both recognition and strategic learning, which I mentioned earlier. Also, the need for instructional content to be simultaneously multisensory provides flexible teaching methodologies, and we use multiple types of teaching resources and manipulatives to support classroom learning. So for example, in our program, we do come up with videos as well as review board games and manipulatives to aid in their learning. So if you've been to the open house yesterday, yeah, you would probably find these familiar. So this is a hand talker that we designed to teach subject-verb agreement. So students were already exposed to countable and uncountable nouns and how it relates to subject-verb agreement. And then they're given resources to make on their own, which they can review and test each other. Okay, so it'll be like irregular and regular nouns like spots, fur, is, or are black, and then they should know the answer. And then this is a wheel where we taught singular and plural possessives, when to use apostrophe, when to use apostrophe s. Studies have also found positive effects of smaller class sizes on the learning process of students. So while small group teaching has been introduced in mainstream schools in school-based dyslexia remediation program in 2012, these sessions only focus on primary 3 and 4 students, and they're mainly working on basic literacy outside their school hours via letter sound associations, which is very much like our main program in DAS. However, small group teaching is not reinforced for primary 5 and 6 students. It might be up to the discretion of the school teacher, but it's not reinforced and embedded in the curriculum itself, and thus not sufficiently provided for primary 5 and 6 students, especially on the examinable components of the English paper, which is what EESP aims to do. So with these in mind, we determined the following research aims: to find out the effectiveness of the EESP on struggling non-dyslexic learners, and in particularly, in what aspects is the program effective, as well as the differences in acquisition of concepts between the dyslexic students and the other struggling learners. So with that, I'll pass the time to Joanne, who will cover the methods of our study. Yes.
Hello, testing. All right, so with the research aims in mind, we came up with the methods. We wanted to triangulate and evaluate the effectiveness of the program, so therefore we employed a mixed research design. All right, so we are able to look at both the quantitative as well as the qualitative aspect. So let's first take a look at our sample size. We have managed to get to recruit a total of 10 students. These students range from primary 3 all the way to primary 6. All right. So this fits our criteria of a struggling learner by scoring 65 and below for their recent examinations at school. So the parents of these students actually approach our DAS learning centers to seek help for their academic aspect, even though the students were not diagnosed with dyslexia. All right, so they filled up a learning profile questionnaires, and that helps us with the screening process as well. So because the Exam Skills program is actually a ongoing program, so we have got 3 streams going on. There is the Primary 5 and 6 standard, there's the Primary 5 and 6 foundation, as well as the P3 and 4 level. So these students are actually combined with the current learners in these classes, according to their school levels that were given for us from us. So the procedure is as such: they first have to sit in for a pre-test, and then they will go for a 20-week intervention program over a period of 6 months, because there is a month of holiday in between. We are talking about term 2 and term 3. All right, then after that, they will sit for a post-test as well. And the teacher log was recorded every lesson. This is also to help us to understand the learning as well as compared to the students with dyslexia. All right, and after the whole intervention period, we also conducted student interviews and teacher interviews via phone calls. Okay, so that's the methods. Let's take a look at our data analysis. As I mentioned earlier, we managed to do both the quantitative as well as the qualitative data. So we first compared the quantitative data. Amongst all the 10 participants, unfortunately, only 5 were present for both pre and post test. So we took their completed test, we marked them individually, and the scores were tabulated. We also analyzed the specific errors. Okay, so this is the results. It shows that from the graph you could see that most of them actually show some form of improvement. However, if you look at all 5 students, there's actually only a medium effect size. Okay, by statistics. So if we were to take away the P3 and 4 student, because only one of this child is in this stream as compared to 4 others who are in the standard stream, if we compare the 4 students, there's actually a large effect size. And this suggests that there's actually a large improvements after the program, after the intervention. So this is one of the extract taken from the pre and post test. So this is from the synthesis and transformation question. If you notice, the question states that we have been studying for our exam since last month, said Julie. So in this question, you're supposed to change it from direct to indirect speech. If you are familiar with this type of questions, you'll realize that in both the attempts for the pre-test and the post-test, it's actually a 0 score, okay, because it's not accurate. So the first one is the pre-test, right? So this student said that Julie said that they have been studying for their exams last month. So you could see that this student managed to change both the pronouns we and our to they and their accurately and correctly. However, have been studying has been retained as have been studying. So it showed that this student has no awareness of this change. Okay, so for the time frame, last month was also retained as last month. So it again shows that this student is not aware that this change is required. For the post-test after the intervention, after the 20-week intervention, we could see that the student also scored 0, but then the results were actually better, closer to the accurate answer. Julie said that they had been studying for their exam since the month before. So we could see that they and their, the pronouns has been correctly changed, accurately as well. Have been studying has been changed accurately to had been studying. So you could see that this application was done accurately. However, the last change, the time reference, last month, she shows that, the student shows that the student is aware of the change that's required, therefore it's different from the question. However, the change that the student wrote was the month before, which is not as appropriate as compared to the previous month. So therefore, this question will still be marked 0, even though most of them were correct. Okay, so that's how strict the marking system is, and therefore we have to stress a lot on the changes that's required. So other than this, of course, we also analyze all the different errors throughout all the other tests as well. And together with our other forms of data collection, we came up with this theory as shown in this diagram. So basically, there are 5 themes from our observations, and these can be grouped under the progress indicators as well as the factors that hinder progress. Okay? So let's first take a look at the indicators of progress. There is some form of understanding of concepts. As seen in the example earlier, we could see that there's some awareness of changes required for the transformation questions, and basically for changes in direct to indirect direct to indirect questions, there's about 5 changes that's required for every question. Okay, and for adherence to explicit instructions, we're referring to techniques and strategies that we taught for comprehension. Some of these explicit instructions are like labeling of paragraphs, highlighting of keywords, underlining verb tenses. All right, so these are some of the explicit instructions we taught during the intervention. And application of concepts is, of course, how well the student is able to apply the concepts in an accurate manner so that they can score them well as well. So we're talking about synthesis and transformation in the topic for that term was the direct to indirect speech, and comprehension for the term was vocabulary related questions as well as true and false questions. And of course, these are also components that they will be tested for their PSLE papers. Okay, so factors that hinder progress from our observations as well as the data that we've collected, there are 3 basic factors that hinder their progress. First one is the behavior. Even though these students do not have the diagnosis of dyslexia, they are actually observed that some of them require some reminders to stay on task. So they're easily distracted, some of them are easily distracted, and they just require that prompt, to get back on task and to focus on the task. And memory retention, some of the students related to us that they actually have some difficulties in retaining the information. So they cannot remember the information and concepts that were taught. So if they cannot even remember, so they can't apply them in the questions and they can't get them right, because they forgot the concepts that were taught. So that is one of the hinder as well. And for transferability, some of the students actually related that they find the questions being asked and practiced during our intervention is actually easier compared to school questions. All right, so therefore they have difficulties in transferring their skills from what they learn in the classroom as compared to school. All right, so for this, we tried to understand them further. We realized that maybe they're thinking in this way, okay? So the practice questions in a class, for this typical class, we actually only focused on one aspect of change. Okay, so take this for example. This is on verb tenses. So the only thing that's required for the student to apply is only the verb change. Okay, so these are the kind of worksheets and questions that's designed specifically to target on this skill. Of course, we also practice our questions with a combination of all the changes that were required. So these are the kind of worksheets that we use during lesson to teach our students. So it's very explicit as well. However, for school questions, you could see that it is a combination of different topics. So in this case, they are supposed to pick that particular topic and realize that, this is the one that I've learned, and therefore I have to pick out the changes that that is required. Okay, so this combination of skills may be also the hinder why they can't transfer their skills, rather than comparing that it's easier or it's harder. All right, so while there are some effectiveness, there's also some limitations to the study. Firstly, small sample size. There was only 10 students who were recruited for the research. So this limits the ability for us to generalize our data as well. The duration, we are talking about 20 weeks, right? So the whole duration of 20 weeks intervention may also in some way limit their ability to retain the information and concepts that they've learned. And the intensity of the intervention, we're only able to conduct a 1-hour class once a week. So this kind of lack of frequency may also affect their ability to pick up the concepts, to apply the concepts consistently. Okay, so therefore, in conclusion, we conclude that this program is structured and has a good teaching approach, is effective for struggling learners with or without dyslexia, and that struggling learners actually display similar difficulties compared to dyslexics in some aspects. And lastly, for future considerations, you may have to take into consideration the longer intervention period as well as an increased intensity. All right, with that, thank you for your kind attention.